Okay, so today we're going to be looking at Chapter 5 notes. Share it over here. And come on, screen. So again, this is the second set of notes that we have for Unit 2 test. This Unit 2 will cover Chapters 4, 5, and 6. And we start out with photosynthesis. So again, photosynthesis, as we talked about before, is basically the food production system for a plant. And it converts light energy along with carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and water into C6H12O6, which is in fact glucose, and also puts out oxygen as a byproduct. Now, oxygen, again, we're thankful for that because obviously we take that in and kick out carbon dioxide through respiration, which is Chapter 6, by the way. We talk about respiration. But again, that's kind of the basis of how this thing works. So you need carbon dioxide, you need water, and you need light energy. Now, the book a lot of times will say sunlight, but light energy will do it. And again, it converts that into the food, the glucose for the plant. So again, life depends on photosynthesis. Without photosynthesis, we wouldn't be around because plants wouldn't be around. And obviously, without plants, animals cannot feed upon plants. The herbivores, such as the deer in the picture here, wouldn't have nothing to eat. And of course, omnivores such as us would not have a source of food, either plant or animal. So again, that conversion of kinetic energy from light energy into a chemical energy, such as glucose, is what keeps everything running on planet Earth. The wavelengths that we're talking about that are actually captured by the plant are very small. You've probably seen this before, the colors of the rainbow. If you've been in grade school, you probably remember Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Well, look what they've done to us now. They've thrown cyan in there and did away with indigo. If you want to keep on with Roy G. Biv, go right ahead. But again, these are the wavelengths that we have that plants in the visible light spectrum can capture. The shorter the wavelength, the higher the energy that the wavelength has. So the short wavelengths will be the violets, the blues. The longer wavelengths are the reds. And again, this is the portion that plants capture. They really like violet light and blue lights. Those are high energy lights. In fact, if you remember going to the mall at some point in time, there's the stores like Spencer's or Hot Topics would sell black lights, especially for people my age. I always liked it as a kid because it would turn your white shirt into glow in the dark. But the reason they were selling those black lights was not to turn your white shirts into glow-in-the-dark shirts. It was because of what was growing in a lot of people's closet at that time, which would have been marijuana. And again, that black light is a misnomer. It's not black light. It's actually a violet purple light, which is a lot of energy that is given to that plant and helps it grow. So again, these are the visible spectrum lights here, the Roy G. Biv. Only some of these wavelengths reach the Earth, and only some of them are visible to us. Again, this colors of the rainbow is what we can see, the primary colors. Plant pigments capture this light. And again, as we said, they really like the purples. So you see down here how much is actually getting captured, a lot here. So chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, these are two types of chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is a pigment, again, that absorbs light, and it absorbs a lot of the light that's in this spectrum here. Carotenoids are also pigments found in plants that absorb a lot of light here. Look at the greens here. It says, obviously it drops precipitously here because green light will reflect off, as you see in this picture in the middle. It reflects off the plant. So whatever is reflected is not absorbed, and that's the color that you see. So green, again, not much of that light is taken in. Now, you get into the orange and reds, you see it picks back up again, and they can capture more of that. So again, kind of interesting in the light frequencies that they filter out. And again, naturally, it's going to get a mix of all of these from sunlight. And then, in artificial settings, greenhouse settings, you can actually manipulate what light color you want to have. So you can put them under black light, so to speak, and focus that energy on them. So how do they actually capture it? Well, you got to get down at a little smaller level to see the capture here. So gas exchange, the carbon dioxide, obviously needed by the plant, comes in through what we call the stoma. Stomata is the plural form for stomas. And these are little openings. There's guard cells here that control these openings on the epidural layer of a plant. Mesophyll cells, which are found in leaves, controls that entry. So carbon dioxide goes into the plant for photosynthesis, and then oxygen and water leave the plant through the stomata as well. And again, that's what lets this stuff in and out are the stomata. So these mesophyll cells contain chloroplasts, central vacuole here. We talked about that in the last chapter about it being a storage component for the cell. The nucleus housed here as well. This and here, the chloroplast, is where photosynthesis is going to take place. And each chloroplast, has the ability to capture light energy. And then it's going to turn that into chemical energy in the form of glucose. So again, chloroplast we talked about with our cells, outer membrane, inner membrane, the thylakoids where the light reactions occur, the stroma in here where the carbon reactions occur. There's your circular DNA, there's your ribosomes. As we talked about, chloroplasts used to probably live on their own and were engulfed by cells because they appreciated what they did and wanted them working for them, so to speak. So looking at this at even smaller level, the thylakoid, I always said it looks like a little green Oreo stacked together, or little green pancakes. Chlorophyll is embedded here. That's going to capture the light energy. The thylakoid itself and the thylakoid space, this membrane is where the light reactions occur. And again, that pigment in here, the chlorophyll, the carotenoids are going to capture that sunlight. So that's where photosynthesis occurs for a lot of plants. Now, so we'll see some of them do it in different spots. Not all of them do it necessarily all in the mesophyll cell, but we'll get to that a little bit later in the lecture here. So again, photosynthesis occurs in the chloroplasts. So we're looking at specifically here the thylakoid membrane, which is a phospholipid bilayer, again, just like your cell membranes. And you've got these photosystems embedded inside the membrane. Photosystems are proteins. And this one shows you again how messy a protein looks. So the book here kind of gives you a little insight to what that actually looks like. And again, it's kind of like if you bird nest an open face reel, you got all kinds of wires tangled together. It's exactly what a protein looks like. And we call this a photosystem. And this is, again, going to be where our light reactions occur. So two basic stages, light reactions and carbon reactions, fuel the process of photosynthesis. And as we see, the light reactions occur on the thylakoids, the little green pancakes, if you will, or Oreos, and they require water and light to happen. And they also need carbon dioxide coming in to get this process started later on for the carbon reactions. So water comes in, and again, carbon dioxide is going to come in for the second part to fuel the reactions of photosynthesis. Oxygen, as we said, is just a byproduct. Plant really doesn't care about it, but we certainly do. So the light reactions, again, begin photosynthesis. And as it says, the photosystem is a part of an electron transport chain that converts light energy into ATP and NADPH. Now, we've already talked about ATP and then being an energy carrier, that the phosphate tail will break off and it'll give energy, and release energy. But NADPH is also an energy carrier. And I want you to do me a favor. on NADPH, I want you to write down for photosynthesis only. If you want to think about the P standing for photosynthesis, go right ahead. This is an energy carrier just for photosynthesis. Now we're going to have another one in respiration in the next chapter called NADH. But I want you to remember P stands for photosynthesis. That'll help keep it straight. So you see the broad overview here of what we've got going on. We're going to go through each of these stages individually and talk about them. But you see we go photosystem 2, electron transport chain, photosystem 1, electron transport chain. So the first step, photosystem 2 produces ATP. So again, it produces that energy carrier. The first thing that happens is light energy comes in to this reaction center, and then there are electrons here housed from the splitting of water molecules. Water splits and supplies these electrons. These electrons are in a normal stage, but when light energy comes into these protein channels, these photosystems, and again, I'll tell you, this purple right here is exactly what we have here, okay? This nasty looking stuff, but the book cleans it up for you. So again, this is the photosystem. And that electron, when light hits it, it gets excited, and I mean, almost starts to vibrate, and it gets to a highly active charged state. I always think about Will Smith's song, Getting Jiggy With It, you know, how it just starts to vibrate. It's all wired up, all jacked up on Mountain Dew right now. So this thing is going to eject across this phospholipid membrane once it gets to that excited stage. And it produces ATP, as it says here, light energy transferred to the reaction center. The electrons are ejected, and water is split to replace the electrons. So water, got to have a constant source of water, because without water splitting and supplying these electrons, photosynthesis does not happen. Oxygen is produced as a byproduct of this process. And again, we are thankful for that. It's not going to use it, it's going to kick it back out of the plant, but we are thankful for the oxygen that is produced. Photosystem 2 again continues. These electrons move down the transport chain through that phospholipid membrane of the thylakoid. This is a thylakoid again. This is the little green pancake or Oreo, however you want to think of it. And when this happens, hydrogen gets pumped into the system here, migrates down to the area where we have ATP synthase. Now, anytime you see that word synthase, that means it's making something. And in this case, ATP synthase is making ATP. So ADP and phosphates are glued together at this spot. So it is creating ATP. So photosystem 2 is responsible for creating ATP, an energy carrier. Once that energy is burned off, it will cycle back around and get glued back together. Photosystem 1 produces NADPH. So basically, by the time the electrons reach here, they're out of gas. They were excited over here, and again, run across through here, and now they're in a low state. Light energy comes back in, gets them all revved up again. So they start vibrating again, and then they eject again. And when they eject again, they're going to go over here and form NADPH. NADP plus is a reduced state. Well, we're going to reduce that state and gain an electron to form NADPH. So again, NADP is like ADP. We've got to glue that H back on there, in this case, to reform this energy carrier. So that reduced NADP to NADPH. Remember, reduction means to gain an electron, so it does gain an electron. So that's the light reactions. Okay, photosystem 2, photosystem 1, and you get ATP and NADPH out of those two reactions. Still no glucose made though. Glucose is actually produced in the carbon reactions. And again, carbon reactions have a lot of different names and have had a different name a lot of, in early history since they figured out photosynthesis. Used to call them dark reactions. Then they got away from that because they, even though it can happen in the dark, doesn't necessarily have to happen in the dark. Light dependent reactions. Light reactions are known as light dependent reactions. Carbon reactions are known as light independent reactions. Kind of got away from that because You need the light to make this first part happen, even though it's not directly, accessing light. It's dependent upon the first stage happening. And then there's another name that you'll still hear it called by, and that's Calvin cycle for the person that discovered it. So Calvin cycle carbon reactions are the most common names now. As you can see, the carbon reactions are a cyclical little spinning of a wheel here. So the carbon reaction itself goes in a wheel. So we'll call this thing wheel in the sky that keeps on turning. For you Journey fans, you've probably heard that song before. I can't sing, so I won't sing it to you. So this is the wheel in the sky that keeps turning. And as this wheel turns, you can see that the end product here is glucose. So step one, we have rubisco, which is an enzyme that adds carbon dioxide to an RUBP molecule. RUBP, again, is a creation molecule here for glucose, and it produces an unstable 6-carbon molecule. And that's good because that molecule in step 2 down here is actually going to split apart into to 6 of these carbon phosphate chains known as PGA. And that is going to be synthesized into what we call PGAL or PGAL. And this is the payoff here. You see the ATP and NADPH formulating this PGAL here. Once that happens, step 3, one of these PGAL leaves the system and the other 5 continue on. This one is going to go down to help form glucose. And again, it's going to be used to form starch, sucrose, and other organic molecules, the food for the plant. So as this thing reforms RUBP, it cycles back through and comes back around. And again, it is a continuing cycle. As long as the plant is making food, this glucose, carbon reaction is occurring. The cyclical pattern is occurring. And again, wheel in the sky keeps on turning. Now, if we run out of water, we run out of carbon dioxide, whatever the case may be, that's going to stop photosynthesis. And again, we use this and plants use this as well to produce carbohydrates. So glucose chains can form cellulose, which is a structural carbohydrate, structural meaning building things, or non-structural carbohydrates such as starch, which are meant for energy. And when you eat plants, our digestive acids will break down cellulose and starch. The starch we get sugar out of, and the cellulose provides roughage. We have a hard time breaking down cellulose. If you've ever wondered, back in the day, fuel prices what they are now, biofuel was going to be the thing that kind of weaned us away from fossil fuels and offered great promise because there is energy stored in cellulose, but cellulose is hard to break down. And about 10 years ago, when that kind of caught fire, that biofuel, they soon figured out that they were spending more money trying to break down cellulose and accessing the energy than it would be to just purchase fossil fuels, oil and gas, things like that. So cellulose conversion, the technology is not there yet, but hopefully one of these days we do get to the point where we can use more biofuel, because obviously it's a more inexpensive and cleaner form of energy than what fossil fuels are. So again, as we said, not every plant does photosynthesis in the same way. We have C3 and C4 and CAM plants that use slightly different carbon fixation pathways. C stands for carbon, carbon-3 and carbon-4. CAM, Cresslasian acid metabolism. I won't make you write that on the test, but that's what it stands for, Cresslasian acid metabolism. And it says, notice the different leaf anatomy and Calvin cycle position. So for C3 plants, you can see that the Calvin cycle occurs in the mesophyll cells, kind of what we just described. Here, though, in the C4 plants, it happens in the bundle sheath cell. So the Calvin cycle happens here. So again, the light reactions occur here, photosystem 2 and 1, but the Calvin cycle actually takes place in the bundle sheath cells. As we look at examples of these plants, you can see that again, C3 plants, Calvin cycle occurs in mesophyll cells. Here, light reactions happen here, photosystem 2 and 1 and mesophils, and then the Calvin cycles in the bundle sheath cell. And then your CAM plants, still in the mesophyll cells, they do their conversion at night. You see this cactus here, and cactus is notorious for storing water because, again, they live in a desert, so they have to conserve water. This is part of their water conservation methods. They actually make food at night. They go through this process at night. And again, another little chart here, C3 plants. Majority of our plant species are C3. They're limited by photorespiration. Photorespiration is basically respiration influenced by light. The longer the days get, the more likely they are to die out. And a lot of C3 plants would encapsulate our cool season plants, wheat, rye, barley, oats. Most of our cereal grains are C3 plants. C4 plants like corn, again, limited number of species, more warm season plants. Takes a lot of energy to keep them going. That's what usually limits their growth. And then CAM plants, hot and dry habitats, again, that, photosynthesis occurring at night and making food at night is part of their adaptation to conserving water. So again, the last slide here talks about, a little did you know. This is kind of interesting. This is a sea slug. It's Alicia chlorotica. It lines its gut with chloroplasts from algae. So it takes in chloroplasts from algae and lines its gut with it. The slug can perform photosynthesis fast enough to sustain itself. In fact, the slug even has a gene encoding photosystem 2 in its DNA right here that it's starting to encode. This, again, is an example of an organism that has taken in another organism and is now coding for it in its own DNA. And it works great for the sea slug because they can use photosynthesis for energy. Now, again, slugs are notorious for moving slow. Probably not going to work real well for you if you wanted to do this running off of photosynthesis. But there may be a situation in which, again, you might be looking into that. And we'll talk about, GMOs and things like that, genetic modification, later in the semester. But we'll have a discussion question coming up in the near future about, would there ever be a case where humans could actually power themselves through photosynthesis? If we could splice in that gene code for photosynthesis, would we be able to do that? And I'll just tell you right now, as life exists, not enough energy to keep us moving. Okay, sea slugs move very slow, don't need much energy. We typically need a lot more than what photosynthesis could provide. But we'll discuss some options and some possibilities as we go forward. So that's the end of chapter 5. And again, we'll pick back up with chapter 6, which is the breakdown of the things we just talked about in 5.